Let's go ahead and get started. We'll call this meeting to order at, depending on what clock you go by, we'll split the difference, call it 3:01. Our first agenda item is approval of the September 20th minutes at our recent select board meeting. I noted that we should start with the motion and then have discussion. So let's do it that way. Do I hear a motion to accept the minutes of September 20th?
I'll make that motion.
A second? Great. Any discussion on the September 20th minutes? All right. All in favor of approving the September 20th minutes? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. That took 30 seconds. I'm going to call that a record.
Like I have you coughing. Is that not how it always works?
All right. Our next agenda item is a review of public comments. I see no members of the public in attendance today. We have received no public comments through the form on the website. So unless someone has something on the minutes that we've, or the comments that we've already received,
I kind of do, but I was going to include it in the admin committee report, so
okay.
I'll hold off.
Great. All right. No business to discuss for that agenda item. Our next item is just some reaction from our presentation to the select board. So we presented to the select board this past Monday. And I think that was received overall quite well by the select board. Heard some feedback after the meeting to that effect. Happy to hear how others thought it went, or if they've heard anything.
I congratulate you all for being there.
Yeah, it was great.
It was a nice showing.
Very nice. I'll go first. First of all, I thought Jackie did a fantastic job representing us.
Yes. 100%.
You were prepared, articulate. You provided a good synopsis of where we've been at. When some of the questions got thrown at you, you handled them very well. Some of them in more detail than I think you may have been intending to actually have to address at the meeting. I will say that I was, as a generality, I would just ask that in the future meetings for us being part of that, because we'll be there at least one other time. Is that correct?
Yes.
That, if the select board has any questions, that they perhaps ask them without any insinuations as to the intent of our process. I do think that it's important that because we are presenting potential proposals to the select board, that there's that very black and white line between asking a question that would maybe influence the direction that we're looking at versus asking a question about what we're doing. And as an example of Brattleboro came up, I do feel it's important, especially for that particular subcommittee, to engage with a town that has gone through processes like this, for us to better understand how the town of Bennington itself differs from the town of Brattleboro, and how that may influence our decision and the impacts behind that decision compared to that town. I think it's very helpful to get outside perspective. And I just want to make clear to the general public who may or may not be, following all of this, is that we are focused on the town of Bennington, and that there is outreach, a lot of outreach here in Bennington that is also separate and being included in our decisions. There are, however, outreaches to other communities that have been through this on a form of government level that are important stakeholders to talk to. So we would be doing the town of Bennington a disservice by not reaching out to these other towns to get their perspectives, their experiences, and that is why we're doing that. So I appreciate you being there and representing us the way you did. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, I agree with that. Anything else? Great. One thing that came up for me there actually was we did have a few members of the public that also came up and asked a few questions that you know, I think the select board sort of addressed some of those concerns, and again, it was some of it was items that maybe aren't particularly relevant to the work of the charter committee, but you know, certainly are things that the public have a concern about. So I think that was helpful to me in the sense that it informed, I think, some of the comments that I put into this public forum presentation that we'll see in a minute, to sort of introduce the concept of the charter and what's actually in there versus what you know exists in other sort of town ordinances and bylaws and stuff. So it was helpful for me to hear from the public sort of their understanding of the charter at this point. Anything else about this meeting with the select board or potentially the next meeting with the select board?
Well, maybe it falls more under governance, but stepping back from necessarily our presentation portion of Monday's agenda, I think I was shocked at overall the experience of the select board meeting and found it to be really negative and stressful, and I'd be surprised if anyone left Monday being like, wow, what a great you know, it was difficult to sit through, and to be fair, I left after our agenda item. So with that in mind, and I don't know that it's under the charter's purview, and I think it would for a subcommittee be under governance, if there's any scope for the charter to help inform a more productive, collegial type meeting of the select board, I'd welcome the governance committee or another committee to consider that, because we do have an opportunity in front of us, and Monday was disappointing to me as a resident of Bennington, not you know,
sure.
So yeah, I think I would just say that because it was disappointing overall, and not because of any particular single person. I'll say too, it was a variety of factors that I think our charter maybe could have a role in guiding and improving.
I appreciate you speaking up on that and sharing that. Do you have particular thoughts maybe that you'd like to pass on to the governance?
I don't. I guess I haven't looked at the charter language pertaining to governance that closely to know what a scope would be. Obviously, I think there's like a code of conduct. There might be other things that are outside the scope of a charter that the select board has adopted separately. That's a natural place. But again, I feel like we'd be remiss not to just, or for me, to not name that was like a wild meeting for me. Again, speaking for myself. And we have an exciting opportunity, and maybe there's an opportunity there to address some of those dynamics.
The board does have a very lengthy rules of procedure, which does in fact mention decorum and those kinds of things, which unfortunately we don't necessarily follow very effectively.
Right. So that, yeah, but I wasn't sure if there's something further.
Maybe we could recommend a training for them as part of the recommendation.
For a therapist, or you know, for everybody, or even Meryl. I think the council, like maybe she even has thoughts about. I mean, like, just like difficult select boards are nothing new for the state of Vermont, I imagine. So
Sure.
maybe there is
Right.
something
We have a long,
beyond and above.
rich history of it, yes.
Yeah.
The board does receive
yeah,
annual training.
I don't
Annual training.
recall anything in the charter related to their behavior.
Oh,
No, I mean, I think
But-
And I
the
don't-
charter grants them, like,
Just the powers that
Authorities,
the
right.
select board has, but I couldn't disagree with anything you said.
Just wanted to throw it out there.
No, if there was something, I would have jumped on it after
Okay.
that meeting.
Thanks for.
If I thought that there was something, but I think that they have to enforce their own code of conduct and decorum at those type of meetings. That's something they need to
Fair enough.
deal with, like most boards.
The only thing, this wasn't about our presentation, and my thoughts on this, I do not obviously know the intent of this when the police department was up there, public safety, for the presentation.
oh, yes.
I don't know what the intent was or the thoughts behind it, and I don't want to assign intent or anything like that. I've been sensitive, though. I've been sensitive for comments relating to CPARB ever since the last CPARB meeting, when some things were brought up about what's going on with charter review and the directions we may be taking. And the comment that, and it was a joking comment, the comment by Chief Doucette that I know there's people that don't want us to get along, and it's kind of like, that's not helpful.
Yeah.
It's honestly just not helpful. And I was kind of disappointed to hear that come from a person. I respect Paul Doucette, Chief Doucette, and it was kind of like, you know, and I don't want to read into the comments like that, but when we hear even joking comments like that coming from public officials, it's kind of like, yes, that was not the time and place. That would have been great sitting at the pub afterwards, you know.
Sure.
You know.
And that relates too, I think, to one of the points you made about that line between our role and our charge as individuals in a committee and interacting with people in power, whether it's a select board member or a town official. You
Yeah.
know.
We're going to talk about CPOIB in a little bit. We did meet with the chief the following day on Tuesday, and that comment did come up.
Okay, great.
So if I forget to speak to that in sort of the CPOIB section, please remind me.
And like I say, I do, and I do know Chief Doucette has done a lot to try to change the color and the tone of his department ever since back when CPARP, the initial charge of why CPARP was formed. And so it's just kind of like, yeah. So thank you for addressing those when we get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing that comes up for me is, as we start talking about this, is I did unfortunately go online afterwards and read some of the comments, right?
Yeah.
But one of the comments that I saw suggested that it was inappropriate that our liaison is also one of the subjects of our charge, to look at the responsibilities of the town manager. And so I just want to say clearly right now that my experience so far is that our liaison has been nothing but helpful. I have not felt like our agenda has been influenced or that the town manager has tried to control that agenda in any way. So
I don't know the reasoning behind it, so I may be completely wrong here, but I would also add that it's a job that I think is being done with good intentions to be here and to potentially save that burden from falling on other people after hours. So I think just as like a management side of things, I think that's actually a good thing.
When you saw that comment, did they elaborate? I mean, just they throw it out there?
they just said it was a conflict of interest.
Maybe they should come to the meeting.
We welcome any member of the public to attend our meetings.
Yeah, for sure.
And this is actually the first time we have not had somebody attend our meeting.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, And we have excellent minutes, so I'm
And recording.
yes.
The voting on the minutes goes by pretty quickly.
All right. Anything else for our select board meeting? Great. All right. Our next agenda item is committee reports. Let's begin by hearing briefly from the admin committee. Yeah, please.
Okay, I don't really have a lot, but I did want to bring up that I brought this up during the admin meeting we met last week, or this past week, and I was putting in from our last meeting the response to the public comments from Jim, and it sparked a thought when I was typing it in. That I brought up to the administrative committee. And so it was basically that concerning the room tax for short-term rentals. And we got into a discussion talking about whether it wasn't specified and we didn't know, and I don't know if the larger group knows or not, but whether or not that tax can be assessed strictly to short-term rentals, or from how it's written in the charter, that would have to be for all lodging. So like I was looking at the Vermont state meals and rooms tax, which applies to all lodging. And so I didn't know what your intent was as a comment, and I just wanted to make sure that we weren't just jumping the gun by saying, oh, it's just like the other one, that it's already in there, and maybe it isn't really being addressed the way that you intended. So I just wanted to bring it back up. I know we had already kind of voted on it, but I also just wanted to be clear that we were all making that vote and understanding what exactly the charter includes. So
if I can just clarify.
Yes.
The charter gives the select board authority to implement a rooms tax.
Correct.
The question is, does the select board have the ability to levy that tax against short-term rentals, but not against a motel, for example?
Right. Do we know?
The answer is that the voters must approve however we use the local option tax. They have approved, given us permission to have it in the charter. For us to use it in any form, must also go back to the voters.
Okay.
So if the question were placed on the ballot that shall we use the local option tax only for short-term rentals, the voters may approve that as a yes or no question. Whether or not the legislature would accept that is another question, because you fall into that. We have a rooms and meals tax. You can't necessarily cut that up, and whether or not a town would have the authority to do that.
How would they track it?
Yeah. So that's really the issue. You're right. It's a rooms and meals tax. It's levied against all rental situations. Could a community, a town, decide that we only want to do it against these properties? I think creates an issue for the legislature that probably we would not be successful.
Okay.
Because with the option tax, it's the state that collects it, right, and returns 70% of it to the community. They keep 30%.
Okay.
So, and there wouldn't. How would you only know the short-term rental issue?
Well, this is the 1% options tax, right?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Because it can be added to the sales tax.
Yeah.
It can be added to rooms and meals tax, and it can be added to alcohol and beverage taxes.
I understand.
You could do 1, 2, or 3 of those,
Yes.
or none.
But I really don't think we'd be successful trying to only do short-term rentals, because I don't think there's any way to really track it.
Okay.
But that's just, we don't know that because we've never tried.
On a sub note, and we will address this in our property subcommittee report, we're looking at how you could track that, a way to track that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good. I'll look forward to hearing about that momentarily.
So hearing all of this, it just makes me wonder if we want to change our response on this comment, which we had, last week said we were going to respond the same way as we had for the other comment. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was this, that it's already covered within the charter. Is that still how we want to address that comment? I just want to make sure that there's no change.
As the person who made the comment, I honestly do. I felt that it was addressed.
Okay.
And it's there are different options that we are looking at now through our other subcommittees that will help clarify and possibly open inroads for possible legislation down the road, and charter changes for right now in the town of Bennington. But that for that specific issue, I think number one, it was too broad a question that I asked, and number two, I think it would be something that we've already got an options tax availability, and if the town decided to put something for the voters, then it would be a voter decision. So I felt it's been dealt with.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you would be satisfied if our response was the charter already grants the select board authority to implement a tax on ropes.
Yeah.
All right, sorry. Just wanted to
Clarify
that.
Yeah.
Just make sure. Okay.
Yeah. That's what we're supposed to be doing.
So that was one thing we talked about. And then the only other thing I just had down was we went over the press release, which since we met has gone out to the media, went out on Wednesday, about our next public forum, our first. And those were the highlights that I have. Do you have other things?
I think the only other thing that I'm still waiting on from many of the subcommittees is that draft language from your individual groups on public comments that you've received. So I think I have that for miscellaneous. I think we have just the one from properties, but I think there's a number from governance, although that I think has largely become the bulk of their work, so maybe some flexibility is warranted there. The voting ones I think were all just advisory, and there have been none for CPORB. So actually maybe we're good there.
And we'll have
I've just talked myself out of that.
Done. We have a little time. We have it almost done, so we'll finish that up for you.
Yeah, great.
If you guys want to get on that.
They got the hard one.
Yeah.
I don't think any of them are easy.
That's true. But comment wise.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Comments.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Properties, brief update.
We do. I'd mentioned last week in our meeting that Carolyn had put out a document that we've been looking at in our subcommittee that is breaking down in a good format that's easily digestible. Residential properties, some of the solutions we're looking at, governmental properties, and it goes down. So number one, how do we track them? How does the town track them? And where are we going to go from here? And we have a meeting scheduled, I believe it's Tuesday now?
Is it Tuesday or Wednesday? The second.
Wednesday.
Whatever the second.
Wednesday. Get out of the staff meeting. Right on.
Who did that? Who provided the document?
Carolyn.
I prepared it.
Yes.
Thank you.
We had a meeting Wednesday night, was it, Carolyn?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we clarified, distilled down our questions that we're going to, when we meet with Dan and Paul Danzaro on Wednesday. Then I honestly think we will still need to talk as a subcommittee, but I think we're getting pretty close to presenting to the committee. I really do.
That's great.
Excellent.
So we're going from there on that. And that's pretty much where I'm at right now. We will definitely have this ready to share with the whole group on next Friday, I would think.
Yeah.
I don't want to speak for the whole subcommittee, but yeah. Yeah. But I think we're going to have concrete proposals for charter change language.
Wonderful. Excellent. Great. Thank you all.
Get ahead of the curve a little bit. Of course, subject to change from the public.
Well, the rest of the committee.
Yeah.
And then one of the things, and we talked about this in the governance, when we met with the governance committee, whatever you come up for language, you don't worry too much about, we're going to send it up to council so she can wordsmith it and make sure that it fits within the appropriate legal standards for charter change language. So don't get too worked up about exactly how to wordsmith it, as long as the concept's there. And then we'll get it to council and then get it back to you, obviously, and you can say, yes, that's what we want, or no, you missed what we wanted to say.
Right.
So just we'll make sure that all gets done before the final recommendation is made to the select board.
Great.
And unless Michael or Carolyn, you have anything to add on properties, I think that's pretty much our update for this week.
Wonderful. Thank you all. Well, governance. Someone from that group. Drew?
I could start.
Yeah.
Everybody can chime in. We met with 2 hostile individuals. No, we met with Stu and Dan as part of, that was the last part of our due diligence, so to speak. And both were extremely helpful in the questions. I think it kind of changed the way we looked at what we were actually looking at. A lot of context, a lot of different perspectives, a lot of good conversation, and what's in the PowerPoint may actually change by the time we make our final recommendations. I don't know, Colleen or Jim, if you have anything to add.
I feel like we're finally getting to the point where we're like, can have a really intelligent conversation. This week will be a good meeting week for us because we'll be able to do that after and really like digest some of this. And I think we're almost at the point where we're gonna make some recommendations really soon here. It went really well. Our process was really nice. These guys were great yesterday. We've had like the nicest conversations with people around town, I feel like, on this particular subcommittee. So I think it's exciting. I think we're pretty close. We feel good.
That's great.
Yeah, we do.
Good.
I was kidding about the hostile.
I thought the committee was somewhat hostile.
I'm less worried about that. It's a little appropriate.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
So, just looking at the PowerPoint here, and I know you said things changed, but I just wanted to pick your brain a little bit. I think last week I asked kind of a little bit about the national search. Has there been any more discussion about that, and like what does that look like? Can you give us some sort of general idea on that?
Well, I think that, at least for me, after speaking with Stu and Dan, I think that that's a select board decision. That's not really something that would be a charter change. So that, that being what national search or just Vermont or, just the town, it's really the power they have to determine that. It's not really something that we would necessarily address in a charter. And Colleen or Jim?
Yeah, I mean, we've heard a lot of things around this particular topic, and we've talked to multiple people. I can definitely say the select board is planning on a search, or that's part of their plans in the succession planning for the town manager. Whether we've also heard some not so great stories about national search candidates becoming town managers of towns and that not working out for the best in the best interest of the town and actually being financially terrible. So I don't know what other word to use there. So I think that there's definitely been a lot of discussion, and I was actually going to suggest a change in this presentation wording around that particular topic. And just one word would kind of change the way that sentence reads. And if it read, when the town manager position becomes open, there needs to be no there. Will there be a national search replacement? And that's just more of a question, because that's where we were asked a question. And I don't know, we all should get together as a group and really discuss it, where we're gonna land. And if that's really a charter change, Or is that the power of the select board to make the best choice for the town at that point, you know? Because those kind of things we also found out take months, so like it can really delay a process. And there's a time cost ratio too that is that effective for the town, you know? So there's lots of, it's a complex question.
And there's been horror stories around
Yeah.
that too.
Have you met with other town managers or select boards around not around Bennington, but around Vermont, perhaps, or any other kind of structured?
We haven't met with any other towns,
Well, we met with the town.
but we met with people from the town here.
Yeah.
Right.
We have read and heard reports from other towns of what happened with some of their select board. And then I guess, I mean, there's other we can talk about, but Stu, you guys would know the name of it. The people that help the towns, the state.
The League of Citizens.
Yeah,
Oh.
they also help with this process, and they
Right.
have a whole process that they can tap into when the town is part of that succession plan that the select board is more than willing to and like has access to and knows about. So there is a pretty good policy, I would say, about this process. So I don't know if there needs to be necessarily a charter change to reflect that necessarily. So that's kind of where we've gotten to in that process.
Colleen, Drew, would you be comfortable if we changed that one word national search to comprehensive search?
Well, I think this was the
That was
That was a
public
question,
comment that
yeah.
was
Oh, okay,
submitted.
okay.
right?
I'm sorry.
And so it's what's
Yeah.
being considered,
Right.
but not.
Not necessarily how it's
Okay.
going to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause that's
Okay,
what we're-
gotcha.
I think a lot of the focus of our team now is feeling very strongly about a multi-year agreement for the town manager.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, what would that look like? There's a lot of advantages to that as far as recruitment and so forth. So that's been a lot of our focus now, I
Okay.
think.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing what's in support and maybe some of the potential downfalls of that. Colin, you mentioned that you've heard stories from other towns, but also that you haven't spoken to other towns.
Oh,
Where
from
have
people
these
within
stories
our
come
towns,
from?
like from our select board, from the town manager here, from other employees of the town, just as part of our information gathering, it's come up, the data, and then I
And
did some research, like I started
specifically
Googling things
Brattleboro,
and looking up
yeah.
town manager situations once I kind of found out about them. I looked into them a bit.
Okay.
If you followed Brattleboro when they
I-
when they hired a town manager, they did a they did a nationwide search. They settled on somebody, and it quickly became a disaster. My word, disaster. But they ended up having to let the person go, and that was I followed that publicly in the Banner, quite frankly. Yeah.
What is the
Seems good
what is
that we
the
can learn
process
from
right
their
now?
experience.
Like, what is
Yeah.
you mentioned the League of Town? Like, what is? Can you provide some insight onto what are the resources there? And then what is the current process? Like, if we were to be searching for a town manager tomorrow, what does that look like for us?
Oh, so the select board would reach out to the League of City and Towns, and then they would initiate a search process.
That could be fun.
I'll even do trustees, yeah.
And then I believe it's a couple month process as they develop the exact description. They put out that search through whatever channels they use to recruit for those positions. But they have a whole process I've heard that goes in place. It's about a 6-month process.
Yeah. In effect, they act like a headhunter
Yeah,
organization.
that's what I was gonna say.
I mean, I get emails from all these headhunter organizations telling me there's a town manager position someplace in Missouri or someplace in Arkansas, and so they're out there looking for candidates. The league is more focused, I think, because it's looking for candidates that they believe will fit
Vermont.
Vermont's.
Yeah, that's an interesting.
But to be clear, the select board can follow whatever process they feel
That's why
is
I'm
appropriate.
asking. So they don't necessarily have to.
No,
use
They
it.
don't. I don't know if any place dictates. They may have a policy in place or something, but it is within the select board's purview by statute to select this town manager by whatever means they feel is
So
appropriate.
that's
Yeah.
my part two. is what is the select board's current or general path to that question?
Their plan is to contact the leagues of city and towns and do.
Is that what they've done in the past historically, or is that?
There's been
They
no
haven't-
historically.
Not much research.
Yeah, a while ago.
When was the last time they did a search, too?
The manager that served 6 years before me was selected through the league's process. He was from another town in Vermont and had retired and was working in the private industry, and the league apparently reached out to him because of his experience there, and they actually hired him here. And he's very knowledgeable, but I'll leave it at that.
But Stuart, you've been town manager for
32 years.
yeah, so there hasn't been much need for
Right.
well, there's been no need for a search for that at least 3 decades. So.
They have had a couple of search parties they're looking for.
That one's gonna live on. We're gonna get a little bit of comment about that, yeah.
I will say too, it was interesting to see this come in on the public comment forum, especially in the, like as I've spoken to folks around town about this committee, about other town positions. There's still very much a sentiment for a lot of folks in this area that like, no, like these people should be from here. Like it should be folks that know Bennington, that you know are sort of invested in this town already, and so this is sort of for me stands in juxtaposition to that.
And it's a dichotomy of opinions for sure.
Yep.
Great.
I guess I will say just on the city, the town, we have also found out that the League of City and Towns will also help with this contract, and they do things like help with
Yeah.
the town manager contracts and things like templates that will be useful in that process if that's a suggestion that we go with.
Great. All right. We'll move on to voting. Any updates from voting group this week?
One follow-up point was a week ago when we discussed voting, there were 2 questions that arose. One was from you, Drew, about how many potential 16 and 17-year-olds are in the town, and then the second was an inference that I made based on a conversation with Cassie about the behind-the-scenes burden that new types of eligible voters would pose on the current system, and her, namely her, because of how the system is. So I emailed her both questions, and she, and I can share that email if that's helpful, just so I get her language right. But basically, it's hard to say. So she didn't know the number of 16 or 17-year-olds in town. She questioned whether or not even the school district would, or like the high school would, because the high school obviously is other towns besides Bennington.
Right.
So she didn't offer any numbers there. And to the question about, 16, like the logistics behind adults who are non-citizens but documented versus 16 and or 17-year-old, that issue, she was like, it's just hard to say, which is very fair, I think, as an answer. So just circling back on that.
Thank you.
If anyone has any thoughts about how we could answer at least that 16 and 17-year-olds question, I'm open, but
I think the only way you could email the school administration, like Laura Boudreau or somebody at the. She's the assistant superintendent.
I think you'd have to
but-
compile. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think you'd really have to start your own file on that and get the town clerk started on that. To be honest with you.
Yeah.
What about census data? I mean, it won't be perfectly accurate, but it could, get us within 15-20% maybe. There was
I
a
could look-
census.
It doesn't hurt to ask. I mean, I don't want to have her do 20 hours of work for it,
Yeah.
but I can ask.
They might have that data. Who knows?
Yeah. Okay.
I also did.
Contact Laura Boudreau,
Yeah.
who's the assistant superintendent. She's generally very helpful.
She's the best contact over there for that kind of stuff.
Also been working on, again, more outreach to other towns to help us with their experiences and any obstacles or challenges that they've had with, regarding the same issues. So we've got at least one one discussion lined up for next week with our subcommittee, pending the time. Hopefully we'll at least have one of us be able to represent at the time that they make themselves available, and then working on another as well. So I've done a good amount of outreach to other towns, and like I mentioned earlier, that's part of us being able to better understand how that would take place here in Bennington, is understanding precedent in other areas, and certainly getting more opinions and experiences from other people who've already been through it. So
yeah, and I think largely at this point we sort of understand the implications, the implementation, and some of the unexpected consequences that other towns have experienced from implementing similar changes. So I think now we're mostly just wrestling with, like, were we comfortable with some of those implications, and do we support that in this town? Great. Miscellaneous.
We did not meet. That's really great. We didn't have any new comments, so we didn't have anything
Oh, right.
to discuss.
And all your existing ones are
Done.
done.
Yes.
All right. Last one on the chopping block, CPORB, for a bit of a more in-depth discussion. Either of you want to kick off on that?
I feel like we had a great meeting with Chief Doucette this week on Tuesday. He was really complimentary, actually, I felt like, to the Community Policing Advisory Board. He said they worked together. He acknowledged the kind of rough road and turnover that helped. It was, that it took a little bit to get there, is more, I guess, the better way to put it. We talked about lots of little issues and some data problems and little things, and he was very, he took ownership of things where he was falling short, and said he would get some of that data stuff to them that he had, just like, there's little things that he really said he could help that would help them. And then I feel like we talked, it went pretty well. I feel like it went pretty well, and he had good things, and he was glad they existed, thought it was going in a positive direction, and yeah. And he really said they have a great relationship. So yeah, I don't know, I think it went pretty well.
Great. Have anything?
good discussion. I appreciated his time greatly. I thought it was impactful on the decisions that we're tasked with. I don't know that it is, I think we talked, amongst ourselves, there hasn't been anything yet that has kind of swayed me from kind of the side conversations that we've had as to where I stand on the issue regarding the charter itself. So I'm hoping in the next several weeks that maybe there's some more information or some other things that'll help lead me to make recommendations and whatnot regarding this particular issue. I think my focus, just the lens that I'm looking at it, is I want to make sure that the board that is in place is effective and it's efficient and their actions are purposeful, and that what the community gets out of it is beneficial to the community and to the Bennington Police Department. My feelings on where that stands today are very mixed, so that's what I'm really looking forward to learning more before this charter committee ends.
Sure.
I'm excited to go to one of their to go to their next meeting. I think that's going to be a learning experience.
Yeah, for sure. They meet Thursdays. I think it's the third Thursday.
Third Thursday. Yeah, it's in my calendar already.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would echo a lot of those sentiments, right? That the chief was really pleasant to talk to, as always, and seemed to really enjoy the relationship that they have right now with the Community Police Advisory Review Board. Yeah, to the point about the comment he made during the select board meeting about some people think we shouldn't get along.
Right.
What he mentioned to us in our meeting was that he had realized that he hadn't spoken to the relationship that the police department has with the Community Police Advisory Review Board in his presentation. He sort of regretted that mentioning them during his presentation was a little bit of an afterthought,
Okay.
but that he did want to just mention that you know, they do have a really positive working relationship with each other, and that he's really appreciative of that. You know, I think there, like many of the issues in town, right? There are some people on both sides that think that the advisory review board should push a little more, right? For change in the police department, for you know, whatever pet projects folks in the community might think that they should undertake, right? And so I guess I would say that's again sort of something that I heard in our meeting with the chief, that you know that the chief, I think understandably, right, wants hopes to have certain things come out of the relationship with the advisory review board, and is sort of pushed to have those outcomes in terms of disseminating information to the community through the advisory review board, and using them as a resource to seek input on certain changes that the police department is considering, and things like that. And it sounds like he's been really happy with what the benefits that the police department has seen from working with that board, right? I think the other thing that we heard in our meeting, and feel free to jump in if I'm sort of misrepresenting anything, is that maybe the advisory board hasn't really pushed for their own agenda with the police department in terms of like getting the data, or understanding like safety data, or evaluating policies, or some of these other things that the board was designed to do, that maybe the police department feels like, okay, if they want to do that, like, we'll cooperate, but like we're not going to like spearhead that effort. Like, that's up to the advisory review board to do, to think completely appropriate. And the advisory review board hasn't really taken the initiative to go after some of those goals, right? I think that's what I heard in our meeting with the chief.
Yeah, and I think that kind of reflects what we heard when we met with the group, is that they felt a little disorganized around their goals and what was really achievable and what was out of their scope, and how much and what they can really function. And they felt they were kind of like they wanted to get that kind of solidified with the select board right now, and I think that would help them a little bit, honestly, my personal opinion. But I think they do have a great working relationship with the police, and I think they're at a point where they're really starting to spring. They maybe they'll go forward with some direction now that they've built a foundation, and I think honestly our investigative process probably helped them quite a bit. Because we asked them to talk about these things, and we asked them how they're doing, and kind of did a little analysis there. I think that probably helped them really kind of to organize just a little bit when someone's interviewing on it and asking around town everywhere. So I think there's definitely been benefit. I think it's still up, in my personal opinion, up for negotiation whether this is a real charter issue or not, or this is really they need to get with work within the select board resolution that they were created under.
Yeah, I mean, if I try to think about potential charter changes related to this topic, I still feel like I'm sort of grasping at straws, trying to like think through what could be appropriate.
Yeah.
It'd be a charter edition, right?
Yeah, it would really be adding something.
And that's what
new.
I would caution this committee as a whole to take into consideration, is they are not emblazoned into the town charter currently,
Right.
other than as part of a select board addition. So the consideration, at least how I've approached it, is I want to make sure that they are functioning effectively and efficiently before the thought of putting them into the charter as a specific group carries them for at least the next 5 years as a mandated town charter.
And I definitely see that point, especially because through our investigation, we found out they're still in their, formative space, I would say.
Yeah, one of the things I brought up with the chief in the discussion was I had asked, and this is to Jackie's point, was how many reports has this committee, has that board provided, and the answer was 0. And some of it, again, to Colleen's point, was, the chief had owned up to certain information, but I'm not speaking for the whole board here, but at least my interpretation of this conversation was that there was still enough data, enough information that they could have taken the initiative to go get, to create a report based on what was available. And then they could have done something like what this committee may do, which is here are potential recommendations, or here's a list of data that we have requested that we have not received. And then at least there's something for the people of the town to go off of and say, look, here's some information that they provided, whether it's regarding traffic or whatever, you pick the topic, and here's where they're looking, versus now I believe we're at the 2-year mark.
Yep.
And there hasn't been any reporting. Yes, things have improved, I think, across the board for our subcommittee. We've seen that based on discussions and whatnot, things are improving. But there is, by the time that we put forth our report, I still don't believe that the information that they'll be getting will even be provided in a report of their own. So I'm really trying to wrap my head around putting a board into the town charter that in 2 years hasn't provided a report that we could go off of to say this is the work that they have done. And that is just my personal opinion, but that's where
It was frustrating to hear a couple times in this meeting with the chief, and also in our meeting with the Seaport board, oh yeah, we have some stuff that's gonna come out in December. In December. I was that kind of,
I will say that there's very low incidences of complaints in this community, so they did handle that in a timely manner. There's only been one up to date. So there's
Sir, what kind of complaint?
Against a police officer. So when there's a formal complaint against a complaint officer, it goes through its internal process and then it goes to the CPAR board for review. And they've only had one in the 2 years. So they have handled that. I mean, some of the missing data that Chief Bissett was talking about was compliments. He's also supposed to be reporting all compliments that happen to the police, and he has to get better at keeping track of all. And not that he's keeping track, giving it to them the list. But there's more compliments than complaints, so that's good. The other stuff, like Mike pointed out, they haven't even really approached or asked for, and a lot of it is data that they can be given because of the training and clearance that they have. So
it wasn't just the reports that he said we've had none, but we also asked how many requests have you had for data, and he said none.
Yeah, there didn't seem to be an initiative of, when we started our committees, we were given kind of a general outline of here's the charges. There was no specific direction this is how you need to go about it, which is kind of why I took, not offense, but I didn't like the way that the select board kind of approached the questions. So we've taken the initiative to go to the resources, to the stakeholders, do our own research to get the answers that are not available or not made available to us. And then we've also had liaisons that have helped us. But all of that has been initiated by us.
Yes.
And that's what was frustrating to me, was to hear that over enough time there had not been, or at least it's not been communicated to us by either the board or the chief that initiative has taken place. And
And the reports that the three of us thought of that asked him about that day, he was like, oh yeah, I got that right here. You want to come over? If you were here, I would show this to you on my computer right now. I mean, if it was something we were able to say, meaning that was readily available and he could easily provide with. So,
And to your point, like, there's only one complaint. If that's the case, in a report, there's only been one complaint, and there's been 75 data boys.
Mm-hmm.
Put it down on paper. I mean, because I think it begs the question of people from the town going. They might look at that and go, oh well, there's only been one complaint. We're doing a great job. There's other people who are going to look at that and go, there's got to be more than one complaint. Like, that's not a realistic number. It might very well be realistic, but it allows the community to have that discussion, and like that's kind of how I view the board, is to open that discussion for members of the community, so where it's not just a partnership between the Bennington PD and a board, it's a conversation. They are the liaison between the community members who, in our discussion also, it's very well documented, some people don't feel comfortable making a complaint. So what is the process for making a complaint? How do we know that that's not dissuading people from making those complaints? That would be one thing that I would look at and go, okay, well, if we have 150 attaboys and one complaint, and we're either the most amazing in the world, which I'm not saying we're not, or there's a gap. And as a board, for that specific issue, that's where I would, as a community member, expect them to step in and improve that process, which, to Jackie's point, the other kind of point was, in our discussion, we felt that one of the ways that they could help is the processes. And there just wasn't that initiative, at least communicated to us by both the board and the chief, that make me feel comfortable at this time.
do you want to ask a question? Go.
Yeah.
I'm looking for me too.
Sorry, now I feel like I'm going way back a little bit, but one other thing I just wanted to mention, just for everybody to keep in mind too, that I do see another way that addressing this charge could be a charter change without putting CPARB directly into the charter, is by granting the select board the ability to empower committees. I mean, not specific to them. If there was anything, and I don't know if this is where we're going to go. I'm just saying that there could be something where you would say, if this was appropriate, the select board, under what they're able to do, that they can grant the power of committees to subpoena documents or like whatever, but it wouldn't have to be specific to them, but it could just allow them, the select board, to do something. And that would be a charter change that kind of would speak to some of the thing. I'm not suggesting that, but I'm just saying.
That actually came up. It actually came
it
up.
could be for anyone.
But I guess my point is, before we give the select board the authority to grant a committee subpoena power, I would want to know that committee is doing an outreach that would demand the need for a subpoena.
Oh, absolutely. And the subpoena was just an example of that.
That actually came up.
That there's another way for this could be, without putting them specifically in to the charter, like that specific committee. It could be something that is just that maybe all committees could benefit from. Could be something that's
is that needed
so it was suggested to me that the select board already has subpoena power over the police department.
Right. Yeah. That's what
and that by law, it is the one power that they're not allowed to grant to one of their subcommittees.
And
I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I was told.
That's why
I think there is language in the charter that gives a select board the authority to empower committees or appoint committees and create committees. I think that's already there. If it's not there, it's in the statute.
Oh, okay. Maybe it's in the statute.
So would the select board have to subpoena the information at the request of that board then? Is that the workaround for that?
I think the subpoena would come from the select board.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it would be direct from the select board.
Okay.
And that's the one power that's not assignable.
We haven't found the need for it in my time.
And CPARB does not want that power. They feel like if they were to be given any sort of that autonomy, because we've talked, or like that kind of any sort of power like that. They do not want it because they don't have someone that's a former police officer, or they don't have a lawyer. They don't have many people that are professionals that would be in the realm of that could advise them or really feel like they could use those powers appropriately than what the current board is. There'd be a lot of training and education involved, and that was directly from them. They really don't want that right now.
Which maybe is like a challenge that the board already has in terms of like evaluating existing police policy and procedures and making recommendations for changes to those things, that there's potentially already that barrier that they have to like accomplishing that goal, right? If you were to then add subpoena power to it, that might become a much larger issue. But from my perspective, like it's already a liability that the board doesn't have that.
It doesn't sound like they're using the power.
That was
they have.
actually something that I went a different direction on, which is, and this may just be a generality, but like everything in leadership doesn't have to involve a lawyer or a doctor or, you know, that white collar requirement. You know, you don't need a master's degree to be effective as a member of a community board, right? Now, I get the experience, and I get, you know, like that board would have access, correct me if I'm wrong, to Merrill if needed,
Yes.
right? So the lawyering part is taken care of to some degree with potentially a budget. Again, this is just my vision of a community policing board, is a board of citizens that are looking for the best interests of the community in regards to how the policing is taking place in their community. So I don't necessarily want, like I know that there's trainings that are provided, and I feel that it should be open to anybody in the community, versus if you start putting in that structure of here's the requirement to sit on this board, you start to push a lot of people away. It becomes more exclusive versus inclusive. And that was kind of my take on
I agree
that
with you
discussion.
completely on this one.
Karen?
So how many members of CPARB do you meet with? You said like they. Is it all of them? Or?
3.
As a group, we met with the officers, 3 of them.
3 top officers.
Because
Yep.
not a
And
quorum.
there's 7.
Not a quorum,
because
right?
they're in a similar situation with us, so they can only meet 3 out of 7, or else they have,
Interesting.
you know.
I had a separate conversation with one additional member of the board that I happen to have lived next to for the past 12 years.
And I have reached out to one without follow-up.
Because I feel like this charge is the one I feel like feel the least, like I understand the least, and I'm trying to think like what information or how could it be presented that would make me feel like, oh yeah, totally gonna like vote, you know, like.
What questions do you have?
Like I don't even know. Like I want to know. Well, I guess the top 2 questions are: what is their present charge? Are they meeting it? And if not, why not? Are they in their own?
Admittedly, no.
Are they all volunteers who are just really busy? I get it. It's not paid.
Mhm.
But if they've existed for 2 years and they're, you know, like, is it that the issue, or is it they're unempowered or budget?
Turnover was an issue that was brought up
They
in
lost
regards
a lot of
to
their board.
the turnover
Which
of the board
is always going to
is,
be the case
right.
because they have staggered terms.
and this was just the reasons that they gave us. Not saying that we're accepting of the reasons. It's just that was something that was brought up. Admittedly, by their own account, because we asked your question 1 directly to them. Do you feel that you're meeting the goals of the board? And the answer was no. I think that I'm not going to speak for the chief, but the conversation with the chief seemed to insinuate that no, they have not met their goals, but it's moving towards that direction. But that goes back to kind of my personal opinion, which is the consideration that for me, I need to see more.
Yeah. And I need to read that select board.
Yeah, you should look up their goals. Go onto their
Yeah.
website. They have like
Yeah.
8 or the goals are long.
Yeah.
And part of the conversation that we left on both with the chief and with CPARB when we talked to them also was they wanted to do a little refinement of their goals and take them back to the
Sure.
select board, and Chief Doucette kind of said he would love to be part of that, and also that, you know, they have done a lot of good work, and people don't get to see that always because it's like little things, and it's changing the way they train, changing some of their policies, the way that they influence him, and even all the community act stuff. So like things around like the animal control building that had a lot to do with CPARB. They've been doing a lot of like kind of activism on different topics each month. So he said there's a lot coming from them. It just hasn't been necessarily been strictly meeting to what those goals of the organization or the board was initially.
But then on the flip side of that, not to discount the great work that they've done with the police department, they were also open with us in the meeting that we had with them, that one of the challenges that they identified for themselves is that the community sort of sees them as being under the police department in a way, part of the police department, not a separate entity, and that they feel like that is part of the challenge that they've had getting good interaction from other members of the community, because they're too linked with the police department in people's minds. They shared that their biggest challenge was that the community doesn't know CPARB's purpose.
It's education.
That they felt like they needed more definition of what they were supposed to be doing. But I think, to your point, that's exactly what we've tried to orient our discussions around, was what are their goals? We could find that on the town website. Have they met them? Largely no. We heard that both from the board and the chief. And why not is what we've sort of been trying to understand and explore. And I want to be careful not to let this turn into a half hour of criticism of CPARB, right? They've been dedicated to this group. They've done a lot of good, important work.
The training for it is insane.
I think there's more that they could do, right?
Yeah.
But they've done good work, and my takeaway so far at this point is that there's probably a good bit of support that they still need from the select board to sort of develop as a cohesive entity and begin to accomplish some of these goals. And in the interest of our time on this being productive, in lieu of putting specific charter change recommendations in the report. Maybe we'll get there, but it certainly looks like it's leaning towards that not being the case. I think it could be very productive for us to lay out, like, we've had these conversations, here's the challenges that we've been able to identify that this board is facing, and maybe that will help bring some of those challenges to the attention of the select board.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
So one thing that, from listening to this conversation, that comes to mind, looking at the charge that we were given about the autonomy of the board, it seems like perhaps what it should have been, or maybe what, like just changing it slightly to like the perceived autonomy, like by the community.
I think you're hitting it on the head.
Right, because I feel like that could also address why maybe there's not more complaints, right? If you don't see them as being autonomous, maybe you wouldn't want to go to them. If there was an increase in the perception of that, then perhaps people would feel more comfortable. Like it seems to me that's not about whether or not they are or aren't, but how they are perceived.
A big piece of the challenge with complaints is that in order for a complaint to be looked at by CPARB, is that complaint has to be filed first with the police department, and the police department does their investigation. After that, then CPARB gets an opportunity to review the investigation. But if a citizen just goes straight to the CPARB meeting and says, I have an issue with something that happened with the police department, the response they're going to get is, you have to go file a complaint with the police department.
It doesn't have to be with the police department.
No?
They can come and file them here. They could file them with CPARB. They have the forms. It doesn't. They don't have to walk into the police department.
Right.
You can file them online.
They can file them online.
Mm-hmm.
They can be anonymous.
Yeah. There's a vast ways for them to get complaints to, it eventually has to get to the chief, but they don't have to go to the police department to get it to the chief. I've heard people take, initial complaints out here before,
And this, I
that got
think, is part
resolved.
of the biggest problem that I found in this whole thing, and I heard it from both parties, was the education part. There's a lack of education about what they do, who they are, what they're, how to really utilize the process that they're there for appropriately. They have no budget, so they get their budget on the side from others, and and then even the chief said part of, he was hoping that CPAR would help them to talk about all the good work the police do, because I really believe that there's a lot more, the good things that they're doing than doing bad things or being, bad police officers. So they could really use this reporting mechanism to talk about some of the good things in our community.
I think that transparency to the fullest is the best promotion for doing solid work in this specific issue. So the more clarity that everyone in the community has, the more get behind on the data that they're being shown, the easier it is for people to have that sense of trust, because trust is very important. And the word in their goals, partnership, is one that is that's where I think my personal belief is the most problematic, which is I view it as you can still be a partner by being the line of accountability for the community versus more of a vocal, look at the good that we're doing with the police department. The police can still do that, and to Chief Doucette's credit, like, they're out there, they're being active in the community. It's a full-time job. I wouldn't want anything to do with that kind of job. The things that they see and are part of, I'm glad I don't have to do it. So I commend all of them on that. Separate, which is the board that is, it's a review. So I personally would want them to be partnered in providing the data, but focused on the accountability and the trust component, which is heavy into, this is the data I need it at this point, because right now we're tasked with putting a charter revision or proposal by the end of November, and we're well aware that they will not be making recommendations to the select board until after we're done with our charter. And I would feel more comfortable commenting, talking about, proposing, whatever words you want. Having seen those, we just won't have the time to be able to do that.
One question I have is, it keeps getting mentioned that they don't have a budget. Does any board or committee have a budget?
Well, no, not really. I mean, all Planning Commission and Development Review Board operate under the budget that is our permitting and planning budget. Board of Civil Authority, all of that, operate under the town clerk's budget. So there are portions of that budget, such as legal counsel and those kinds of things, that exist in other budgets. CPARB is somewhat unique. They operate under whatever the select board's budget is, and that is a relatively lean budget. They have a contingency line item that we cover many of the CPARB expenses with, but it's not very much.
Okay.
And they haven't really generated very much expense in their time. And if I could just add, after listening to all of this, I think you folks have hit it right on the head. I think the question of their autonomy could be enhanced if they actually reported out on a 6-month or an annual basis what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because they haven't done that. I hadn't really thought too much about it, but that's really the crux of the issue. They don't exist except when they meet. So there's nothing.
Are you implying
So-
we don't get paid for this?
And I feel like, to the budget point, all of these issues and what you're doing, I work in management consulting, and what the questions you're asking are management consulting questions, and there are niche professionals who are facilitators that are probably, full-time job helping facilitate, the visioning and the goal setting and the how of community policing board. I'm on the chamber board, and we had an amazing consultant who literally only consults for local, like Bennington or county-based chambers of commerce. It was amazing, and she put it up, like the skill sets are there. So them being able to access and pay for someone like that, I think, could be a game changer. Which goes to the budget point, beyond just like access to a lawyer. I think just someone to help with that strategic plan or whatever they want to call it would be really, really helpful. Because to me, it's disappointing to hear how little reporting and everything has happened, because there's work to be done, and it's not. Yeah.
Well, it's, I cannot imagine. Granted, DRB is under different, people are asking for permits and things like that. I can't imagine somebody coming up before the DRB board without submitting proposal, paperwork to the board. Our own committee here, we've had to go out and we've had to generate contacts and get information and data. And to not ask for data is, I'm just, well,
I want to preface this by saying that is what was communicated to us by the board.
Yeah.
And by the chief. So this wasn't just the chief's opinion of the situation. No. It's not coming from me personally or Jackie or Colleen. That is what was communicated to us.
And to the point about budgets and consultants, like these are things that I've certainly seen mentioned in a number of reports and from think tanks and other groups about that have evaluated the success or lack thereof of CPOR boards, similar advisory boards, review boards across the country, and those types of supports are the things that often make the difference between a successful board and one that sort of flounders and gets burnt out and has those kinds of challenges. I think it's challenging maybe a little bit with like a budget for CPOP. One of the things that they mentioned to us was that like when they go out to have like some sort of community event, right? Mm-hmm. I think we can all instinctively understand that like a lot of times those kinds of events are going to be more successful if you can like provide food or some sort of refreshments or something like that, but they don't have budget to do those things, right? And so to operate under a meager budget from the select board that is not really designed to empower those types of activities, I think is probably limiting too. Which I think is where they shared with us, like we've kind of had to like rely on the police department to provide like that, funding for some of those sorts of things, to have at community events, but then it's a police event, it's not a...
Can I just add something to what you said? So, my own opinion, the way that you help show the need for a budget is by providing whatever data you can that would show there's a need for the budget. And without it, you basically don't exist in the community. And again, there's two ways to raise that money for the budget. There's cut expenses or drive in more revenue. Show us, everybody has to show, if you're gonna ask taxpayers for a tax increase to increase a budget, show us that there's a need to increase the taxes. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the equation, is provide us with whatever information you have access to on whether that's a quarterly or a semi-annually basis, that we could have had potentially 4 reports by now that we could have gone off of. That might have been pretty bare, but it would have had a list of, here's the information for 2 years that we've been asking for. We have not received it. And that alone asks questions. And that's a powerful resource for the community, which I think in this particular issue is part of, that's the center of the discussion, is making sure that the voice of the community is heard. So, no pun intended.
So I don't know exactly where that leaves us.
Yeah.
That's the end of the report.
Yeah.
I mean, I do feel like I'm at square one.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah,
where
it's
that's
like-
where it's kind of, I don't want to say frustrated, but that's where I feel that I'm at with this specific issue is I have a better understanding of the background, but no better understanding of how that applies to this charter change.
Yeah.
If anything, honestly, in terms of the optics and everything, I think, I don't want to say like I'm more distrustful, but it's really disappointing to hear that they have to latch on to the police department for things, or that the police, I don't know, like, I don't want them to be just the police departments too, like
I don't think
promo
I don't think
board.
that's either. I don't think either of those things are true about what's happening. I don't think they're
Okay.
latching on. I think they have a working relationship that's really, it's built on trust and communication, and that took a long time to get to. And I think that they're both dedicated to bettering our community, and that I think that they're trying to just keep working towards that. I think that they put in a lot of hard work. Something that you guys don't understand or know about really either is that a lot of training goes into hours and hours and hours of training going before they can even get onto this. Once they're on this advisory board, it's a lot of training. They have to do ride-alongs. They have to do all this other stuff. They have to do serious background checking. It's a very intensive process to even get to this point. So it's not that there's other things that have been going on too that kind of before they can even get to that had to happen before they can even get to the starting point for them. And I don't think that they have to like. I just don't. Yeah, I don't think they're like latching on. I think they're communicating, and I think that they're really trying to figure out how to effectively do this. And I think that we might suggest some ways that we see that might help them to get to those goals better. But I was more feeling that they were trying their best and they were a little lost, and that's I fear more fair assessment. While really, doing everything they can in their power, within their limited roles, to make sure the community is benefiting in some way from their existence. So,
Thank you. That's helpful.
yeah, I don't want to do anything to think negative of them. I think they're really nice people that really
Yeah,
work
no,
hard
I don't.
No, yeah.
I don't doubt that.
for our
It's
town.
just like I see their role as so important, and I want them to succeed. And do they, as a group, have access to this town? Like the town of the League of Town Resources or
through the-
ACLU, like.
Yeah, through the town, they would have access to some of that stuff, and I feel like they don't even know that they need those things yet. So I think they're just, they survived a little bit, and now they're in a better place.
One thing I will say too is, your boards are made up of the people who offer to step in and do that.
Right.
And right or wrong, the people who have stepped up to fill those seats and are in those positions, like they're the ones that are tasked with that, right? So that also plays into it as well. Yeah.
I just want to set the record straight about consulting. The CPARB has had extensive training through Brian Core, who
Yes.
is a very experienced. He was a former executive director of a community police review board, a true board that did do investigations, etc. And so they have had training, and they continue to get training. And you mentioned, I mean, it's way more onerous than any other board. I mean, they don't have to get elected, which is fairly onerous, but all the time and hours that they have to put in just to get certified to serve on that committee and do the work they do.
They need
And that was a
clearances.
stipulation from the select board.
No,
when
it's
they were
from the
writing?
police. It's from it's an HR probably perspective,
Yeah.
I would say, because they need clearance because they have to be able to be in a police building and look at a screen,
Yeah.
and that takes a special kind of clearance. They need to have finger checking and background checking and all that, fingerprinting and all that kind of stuff, which obviously none of us were asked for, luckily. I mean, that would just be a little extra, I think.
It's all required
We're
by
not even
like,
sure who you got.
it's all required by security, but there's national standards that all the PDs have to follow about people that can come in and go into the inner core of the building.
So they had to do all of that stuff, which is pretty intense. Besides the there's extra training pieces that go into it for them.
Yeah, so they get legal training from our council. They get a training from the chief. They do ride-alongs. It's way more onerous than any other committee, and I commend them for taking it on because they don't get paid.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, and I think one of the other things that came up when we met with them was that I think some of them felt like that wasn't well communicated to them in their interviews with the volume of commitment that was required
It's a
to
big commitment.
really be part of this board. So,
It's a huge responsibility.
It is absolutely, and it is a lot, and I think there is potentially some similar feelings in this room on that issue, and so but so I think there is potentially some reflection all around that could be productive. So, all right. Well, we've thoroughly discussed that.
Thank you for the report.
To what end, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I guess in thinking through where do we go from here with this particular charter charge, does anyone feel strongly that there is a charter change that should be considered?
No.
No.
I need to read that website.
I don't.
Yeah, I know we don't. We've talked about that. In terms of the report that we issue at the end, I'm just looking to sort of take the temperature on, do we include some narrative on the process that we've gone through and try to identify some of the challenges that we've surfaced, or do we just leave that very short, say we're not recommending any charter changes?
I think my personal opinion is that we somehow summarize the lengthy discussion we just had so that it's not left from square one for
Right.
perhaps.
So
I
for
look
next
at this.
charter
I look
for-
at this charter change as like the next charter committee
Right.
is
Yeah.
probably going to be tasked with this. So I'd like, if I was
Makes sense.
on that board, I would want to see, okay, the previous charter committee, here was the starting point. There was discussion about, this board needed, to show the following things, and now it's been 5 years. What has grown for us to effectively do the same thing, which is to insert them into that town charter? So that's my opinion as to how we should handle.
If I could, I think that kind of a report out would be extremely helpful
Yeah.
to,
And I think
to the
that
folks
would
on
be the
CPARB as
benefit.
well as to the select board to
Yeah.
better understand this issue of autonomy.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree with that too. I think that our feedback would be very, very beneficial to them.
Yeah.
It is almost really 8:4:30. I have a hard time after this hour.
I understand.
It ends up not being a very good day of the week for me. Just being honest.
All right, well, we're gonna move on to.
I'm okay if you need,
Yes.
if she needs to go.
Sure.
I'm okay with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one thing that I was gonna ask quickly before
Yeah.
you step out, I
It's okay.
understand, but next agenda item, review PowerPoint for listening session. I want to do this piece while you're here. The one thing that I was going to ask of all of the groups was I'd like to have a sort of a clear understanding of who is sort of going to take the lead on presenting out of their own group. Colleen, you're on CPORB and on the properties, right?
Not on governance. I think I'm going to
Governance.
talk about governance. We talked about it yesterday and decided that as a group.
So you're the.
Okay. Okay, great.
Then, okay, can I just interrupt
Yep.
real fast? So, since you're leaving, I'm going to be making updates to this. So maybe this coming week, if you and I could just take some time,
Yes.
and you can help
Go through it.
go through it with me, so that I just want to make sure that the people who are speaking, that the bullets.
Match what we're going to say.
Yes.
Make sense to our minds. Yeah, I didn't understand that.
Okay.
Great. Colleen, thank you.
You're welcome. I think this. I think our slides match what we actually have been considering, so that makes sense to me. They look good. Thank you very much. And will one of you mind doing CPARB?
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
we'll figure it out.
Good. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Good
much.
to see you.
Good to see you too.
I'm sure I'll see you soon. Colleen's my temporary neighbor.
Sure, yeah.
Living next door to me temporarily, or across the street from me temporarily.
Or I can just take a picture. It's fine.
Or you can, whatever works for you.
Or yeah, I could just give you mine. No, I wrote mine.
All right, draft of the PowerPoint presentation for our public forum. First couple slides are sort of maybe you could say from the admin committee, if you will. I notice bullet 2 is going to be an invigorating discussion.
Yes. Yes.
But I thought I would sort of begin the presentation that evening. I would introduce us. And then, like I said, based on some of what I've heard at the select board meeting from members of the public and stuff, I thought it would be helpful to take a minute and go through, like, what is the town charter? Like, what's in there, what's not in there? We've gotten a number of public comments of things that we've said, like, this is really an ordinance. So just lay that groundwork for folks.
That's great.
And then, highlight some of the unique or uncommon charter provisions that exist in Bennington's town charter that are sort of different from what's in other communities. Some of these are, just interesting. Some of them are, really relevant to how the town functions, like the Bennington Downtown District, right? And I think the authority to recall elected officers is something that probably a lot of people are not aware is an option in Bennington specifically. And then sort of explain the charter amendment process, right? How this committee was formed, right? And sort of what we've been doing so far when we meet generally. And then sort of lay out for people as well, like what's going to happen, like once we conclude and make our recommendations, like what happens to those, right? They go to the select board, they go to the voters, they go to the legislature.
Climb the ladder.
Right.
So I thought that was a nice way to start off, although, this was, I'm open to other things that folks think should be included.
I think it's timely.
Yeah. All right. Town governance as our second group
We get
here.
to walk out in fog and fireworks. Is there like intro songs or is that?
We need a budget.
Wait, Mike, what is your interest on?
Some sort of a light show or
Yeah.
something.
You probably have access to that stuff.
Yeah.
We don't.
Oh, yeah.
I'll ask around.
There you go.
There you go.
That would be fun.
Be like Idiocracy. Remember that movie?
Oh, yes. All right. So it sounds like the town governance slides are pretty they feel pretty comfortable about presenting that. Review the charge, who you've met with. And then we did talk a little during your subcommittee report about these areas being considered. When you all discuss this, when Colleen discusses this, I imagine, we'll hear sort of some of the pros and cons and what implementing some of these things would actually look like. Great.
And can I just insert here, just, so as we're looking through them, I guess maybe it's obvious, but I just tried to, for all of the sections, just to have them kind of mirror each other. So they're all kind of set up in the same format. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
I had a question about on the vacant and blighted properties, the bottom is in a different font color than the rest of it. Was that just purposely to make me think I'm having a seizure right now, or was that?
What?
It is slightly different, isn't it?
It's really a printer.
It might be a printer issue.
Yeah.
Actually, though, on
No,
that
it's the same as the top.
slide,
Oh,
for,
yeah.
like
Good
on
eye.
Jim, I would suggest a third bullet, maybe, on vacant properties that is an acknowledgement of the differences between commercial and residential
Yes.
and the diversity of property owners that ranges from a person who just died to an out-of-state company and everything in between.
Okay. So we're gonna add a bullet point to that.
Rebecca already took a photo of it.
Okay. And do we know out of that group who's going to be presenting?
I believe I am, right?
Jim?
Yes.
Great.
And I can't attend on the
Bummer. Thank you.
One of the things I noticed, and I don't need any billing or anything, but you did say you met with the regional commission, but you also met with the building inspector.
Yeah.
And
Oh, I sent there with you, right?
yeah, someone might say, well, how come you didn't talk to the town about
You
this?
were forgettable.
Yeah, I know, I must not have made an impression.
and a
Paul
state
didn't
rep.
Yeah.
And you met with Seth
Yeah,
already?
met with Seth, yeah.
How was that? I'm sorry to go off topic.
It's
No, go ahead.
It was educational for
Yeah.
him, to be honest.
Yeah?
A lot of the issues that we're looking at here in Bennington, he's aware of course, regionally, but some of the solutions we're looking at, he's interested in. He's following through. We hope to hear back from him.
Seth he's good. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would be surprised if he didn't follow.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I don't think our issues are unique,
Yeah, no.
so that works in our favor,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Like, what are the positions? What were the positions?
Building inspector, town building
Yep.
inspector,
building inspector.
and a state representative.
Okay, I got that one. Okay.
A state senator.
State senator elect. Yeah.
He's not elected yet.
Yeah, that's right. Well,
He's elected. He's just not.
Oh, he's an
Representative.
elected
Yeah.
representative,
Yeah.
not an elected
not an
senator.
elected
Yes.
senator. So, yes.
All right.
So,
All right, what are we gonna put?
state
Wait a
rep.
minute.
Stay
He's a
with
state rep right
I
now.
don't know why you'd want to talk to somebody from Manchester. I don't understand.
Well, I know him
Don't
work
you
from
say.
housing. He does a lot of work with Housing and Conservation Board. Jackie, for
Yeah.
your awareness, he's really
Because he
high
wasn't
up
from
there,
Brattleboro.
Yeah.
and it's all the same issues.
He
at
was-
the state.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So Seth also was the main author of the Home Act and
Yeah.
all the Act 250
Exactly.
Act. So he's a very knowledgeable person when it comes to land use regulations and law and how it works in the state of Vermont.
And he knows a lot about Bennington.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's been here once or
I
twice.
had I have a comment or question outside of these slides. So should I wait?
I don't know. I don't know what the question is.
She can't roll yet.
Well, it was just about sort of like the logistics, and actually, so I can't attend. I'll be at the second one. But like, is everyone gonna like sit together up front? Everyone have a mic. Everyone, people give certain words on each slide.
Well, what do you care?
Honestly, based on Monday, people prepare themselves. Well, I was gonna say, like Monday.
I was thinking the same thing.
Well, I guess one comment would be maybe if there's an opportunity for you to set sort of ground rules or sort of how we want to receive comments. The more specific, the better. The more construction, and something like that I think can orient people or attempt to remind them. And then I guess one thought, and people can disagree, would be that we're each speaking as an individual of this committee and not necessarily anything. I mean, maybe you're different because you're the chair. But like,
Thanks.
I at least would want to put like an asterisk that's like, just because Jim says something offhand doesn't necessarily reflect the whole position of the board.
Because you guys haven't even voted on anything yet.
Just as a generality.
Just
that's-
something like, I would hate,
Sure.
there to be misunderstanding about something like that.
Yeah, I'm sorry if it wasn't clear. That's what bullet 2 is.
It is now. That's what we left that bullet to there.
And I've been doing a couple email outreaches with my Bennington email address, and I've been doing it saying I'm reaching out as a individual member of the select board, not on behalf, or not of the committee, to just try to differentiate that it's just me, Carolyn, you know, wanting to know. It's not like a formal position or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So,
She
anyway,
raises
that
a
might
good
be
point though about, we need to talk about how we set the room up for you.
Yeah.
Yes.
And now you can limit everybody to 3 minutes, at least
Right,
initially, and then
yeah.
until everyone
Right.
has a chance to
Right.
speak, and then they can cycle back through.
For comments,
So,
you mean?
yeah.
Yeah.
Because you want
You can
to, you know,
enforce them.
sometimes one or two
Can I get
people
hold
can,
of the sign?
can take over the conversation.
You've been
Yeah.
looking for that?
Imagine.
physical.
Drew's
Yeah.
been looking for that all his life. He wants to be able to hold up that sign.
Yeah.
Well, and then also to public comments, similar to what we saw at the select board the other day, do we want to address, like if somebody comes up and they have a question about voting, do you as the chair want to address that answer, or do you want the subcommittee to address it? Just throwing that question out for preparation.
And it begs the question whether or not you're going to answer questions or if you're just going to listen.
Yes.
Correct.
And
Yes.
right is
Yeah. That's a
Right.
big difference, and I don't know if you want it to be a back and forth. At least the first meeting, maybe it's just a listening. I don't know, because you're not actually making recommendations yet.
No.
Right.
Correct.
So it's,
I thought
the chair's gonna-
Yeah, I thought originally that, and maybe it was in a dream, but I thought that Jackie, we were all going to do the presentations and the questions would come at the end.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that will be the format. Thank you for some of these other notes about ground rules and time limits. That's super helpful. I think those are great suggestions. In terms of responding to comments from the public, I think there may be some productive dialogue in terms of like clarifying their question, you know, some questions back and forth. But I guess if we can avoid like stating a position
Right.
on anything, I think that probably is appropriate at this time.
Will there
We're
be
just
somebody
speculating,
taking
just saying, like-
written minutes on this?
oh yeah.
We will have a minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And just I would say being comfortable with saying like, we don't know, we'll get back to, or like,
Right.
you know, that, because we don't want to misspeak and share misinformation.
We haven't
by accident.
finalized the recommendations.
Mhm.
You know, nothing's been finalized.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's a difference between questions about process versus substantive questions. So if
Right.
somebody's asked you, how does this work, or how do I do?
When do you meet?
That's an
You
easy.
mean like that?
That's the
Yeah.
answer to those
Your name,
questions.
yeah.
But
Right.
but if you're like, well, I want to know what you think about that topic. Well,
Right.
that's not appropriate. The board's deliberating, and in the end, we'll have a recommendation. So.
Yeah, you know, so I don't know like how to like put a rule on like we're not responding to question. You know, but I guess just as a committee, like we're on the same page that we're not going to really go down that road.
And maybe you can be kind of the traffic director.
That's what I was thinking.
Like if a question comes in about process, you can answer it. If a question comes in that you think might be appropriate for one of the committee members to answer, then you can say, would you guys like to comment on that? But you know, if it's just like, well, I really want to know what you're going to do right now, you can say, well, we're not in that place right now.
We haven't made
I'm
a
sorry, we
decision.
don't have an answer
Yeah.
to that yet.
But do you have any things that we should think about, or you know?
Yeah.
et cetera?
I think you
More
make a
over
good
here, yeah.
point about, I mean, with this being public comment, or public, meeting, this is an opportunity for us to really take in a whole bunch of public comments that aren't coming in online.
Right.
And if we view it as just the public speaking to us and us listening, to your point, more of a listening session, then that allows us to, in our own time and space, to digest those comments versus
Yeah, trying to
the back and
Yeah.
forth, which, I don't even know logistically if we have the support / ability to cohesively make that work. We don't know the turnout which is a factor in events like these. We've already discussed, some of these issues are very hot button, issues. So,
Well, to that point, I don't know that I initially want to think about this possibility, but it sounds like I'm not really allowed to like take my cell phone under the table and text the police. So like if we get into a position where there's someone really disrupting the meeting, how do we handle that? How do I handle that?
Well, Mike's got an AR-15.
not this time.
No, we would make sure that.
Yeah.
I'll
have
take out
staff.
my phone and text the police.
Yeah, okay.
If it comes to that.
Okay.
And
Because I won't be taking the minutes.
no, you should not be taking these.
Great.
And Jackie, you can always immediately stop the meeting
Right.
if you're feeling uncomfortable. And as a chairperson, you can do that. We're going to recess the meeting for 20 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever you feel is appropriate, and that's it. And then, we can regroup.
Okay.
So, yeah, that you have, as chairperson, you have authority to stop the meeting anytime you feel it's inappropriate to continue.
Okay.
Yeah, I just personally, I don't think you're going to run into
No,
that kind of issue.
I don't think so.
I don't think this committee is going to face that kind
No.
of scrutiny, call it. At least the first time around.
Good. Good.
Especially you don't have any solid recommendations yet, so
Right.
anybody be
They have nothing to be
upset
mad
with
about it.
You would think. All right. Any more notes on like general process,
So-
general format? You did bring up like how we're gonna set up the room and stuff.
I like how the select board had it.
Well, I like the idea of having like the screen in the middle, and like we can sit on either side of it.
Yeah.
Oh, so screen, table.
So
Yeah.
table, yeah,
Yeah.
screen in the middle. Yeah.
Yeah, I think who's the group that's doing the town plan update? I think they had the room set up.
Done that.
similar
Planning
to
Commission's done that a couple times.
Yeah.
And so the audience would be essentially sitting back, facing the screen directly.
Correct.
Yes.
With
Yeah.
enough room for Cat TV to be able to fill.
Mhm.
Right.
Right. Okay, we can do that.
The town will set that room up in advance for us?
Yep.
Okay, great.
And you'll all be mic'd, all of them.
Okay, great. Thank
So
you.
we know the Cat TV is going to cover it.
I believe they are.
Okay.
I mean, they'll know about it. They may not do it live, it'll probably be.
Oh, yeah, no,
recorded.
It's going to be.
I didn't know if we needed
Yeah.
to confirm that
Yeah.
they're definitely going to be there.
It's we've already made arrangements to be covering this. I mean, and it's just with just processing and setup, tear down fee, because I'm already here. It doesn't seem and I feel more than comfortable speaking for the board. I'm going to be there anyway.
Okay.
I can just tote my little camera.
So we know that
Yeah.
Cat TV will record it at the very
Yes.
least. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, there's no way we'd want to go live on a listening session. To be honest,
Yeah.
people number one, people would probably be disinhibited to speak freely.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, that's always an issue. Is like if there's a camera, even if it's not live, it does intimidate a lot of people. I mean,
Yeah.
when I first started working here, I was terrified of the camera, but
Yeah.
you get used to it. But a lot of people, they just never have that experience.
Now you're just a hot dog, right?
Yeah. Now I forget it's there and I get myself in trouble.
All right.
So should we change the slide to not say questions at the end? Should it just say comments? Or are we comfortable with it still saying questions if we're not going to be like?
Do we say open for public comment? Is that when we have them come up and ask?
Yeah, this is
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
This is
this
that
is
point.
the
This is the last
last-
slide.
yeah.
Just to invite people to come
I
up.
think it's fine.
Yeah. Because some questions might be like, hey, what? I don't understand. What's the process? Can you explain it to me? I know you said it in the beginning, but I wasn't sure. That's a question you probably feel comfortable
Yeah.
Very
answering.
much so, right?
Yeah.
No. You can see like.
And someone might ask a question they don't expect an answer to that night, but they say, I'd like, here's a question I have that I'd like you to think
And I
about.
think as Mike said, somebody may ask you a question at the end of the thing that addresses one of these things that you or we haven't even talked about. And you might say, well, thank you very much for that one. That's bullet 3. Put that one down.
Right. Okay. All right. Make sure.
I have every confidence that Jackie's gonna be able to handle
For
it.
sure.
Yeah, honestly,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's fine. Okay. Properties. I think we covered properties. Okay.
If you do have any changes, just to put this out there too, this coming week, you just, if you want to just email them, we can get them changed this week, because I know next Friday we're going to be hopefully finalizing this, so
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
if things happen this week and you want to add. Okay.
And just make sure that you get this to Jonah and make sure he knows that he needs to set up and get you guys, going, so.
Oh,
Yeah.
right. Okay.
So then it's not on you to bring your laptop and figure it out, and then when it's not working, whatever, get Jonah the file and let him know that you'll need to be set up at on the 9th with a PowerPoint presentation,
Great.
and then he'll set it all up and make sure it's working. So
Okay. Voting. Voting. First question. Who's presenting? You're not going to be there.
She won't be there. And then we're both on the CPARB
And
and
the
this
voting,
committee,
yeah.
so, I mean,
And we had talked in the admin that I was hoping not to take one of these, but it seems like I'm going to take one of them. So I'm happy to take either.
yeah, I think we can just figure that out. I mean, I'll defer to you, whichever one you want to do, take.
Mike, I like you. I'll take Seaport.
Thank you so much. Love that. Appreciate that.
That's
All right. Hey, you know what? I'd like to do voting. Thank you.
I'll see what worked
I
out.
appreciate that.
Right on.
Put me, yeah, there we go. It'll be great. Be on the voting committee, they said. It'll be fun.
How did... Yeah, never mind.
I almost spit out my coffee on that.
All right, voting slides. Any questions, concerns about what's here?
I mean, do we intend for this, information gathering today to be exhaustive?
Whatever you want to talk about.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's okay, Michael.
Well, and I think our comments can and probably should
Yeah,
be
I defer to
more
Michael.
exhaustive than what's listed
Yes.
on the
Yeah,
slide.
right.
Yeah.
this is just the highlights.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, with you not being there, I would love for you to make sure that you send me a list of bullet points with what you would like to be covered as well.
Oh.
If there's,
If it's not.
Frankly, Carol, I found your comments regarding documented versus undocumented
yep.
non-citizens were fascinating.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Okay.
Nitpicky thing, but do we maybe want to just avoid this abbreviation under state election management software? The comma, I don't know.
There we go.
Yeah.
if Rebecca agrees.
It's a very miscellaneous thing.
Surprised.
Put in there.
Very.
Punctuation, I just...
This last one too, I thought was I was looking at the state voting guidebook for town clerks or something like that, and like that's where actually I think the language that came that this last bullet point came out of came from was like anyone, like it's actually in like the law somewhere that like all that electors shall be chosen from the pool of eligible voters, right?
Right.
So,
And that came up in
Interesting.
Winooski, that was affirmed by
Yeah.
the clerk. Well, she
Yeah.
brought it up herself.
oh, okay, yeah. You feel comfortable with voting?
Yeah.
All right.
I just want to thank you again for that opportunity.
Uh, Any comments on the Seaport slides?
Font color, but other than that, we're
Are there gonna be printed materials available for people to like take home or look at while they attend?
There will be business cards for sure.
Business cards, okay.
Would our slide be posted on social media after the event or the town website maybe?
It'll probably
PowerPoint?
be,
Yeah.
It'll probably be up before the event,
Yeah.
Okay.
and it'll stay up
Okay.
Yeah.
after the event.
I think that's pretty good then.
Yeah, whenever you finish this and you send it to Jonah, just make a little note, hey, can you post this on
Yeah.
our website?
On the website,
If
yeah.
that's what you want. I'm not saying you have to do that, but it may help people to understand what they're in
And
for.
Yeah.
And I can incorporate the QR code into the video.
Oh,
That's cool.
Yeah,
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome.
yeah, just,
Yeah, that's great.
Would it be helpful to have copies of the charter there?
wouldn't hurt.
yeah, that's
We
a
asked
good
them the
idea.
charter and even the CPAR
Resolution?
The
resolution.
Seaport resolution.
And the charges maybe?
Yeah.
Just those three things.
Yeah, okay.
And
I would also, I mean, I think you already
And
actually
another
covered
thing.
this, Jackie, but like in your remarks about like things to date, I would just impress upon people how transparent we are in that, one, our meetings are public. Two, there's publicly an available agenda in advance and minutes. Three, they're all recorded. Four, we're doing this twice. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
like whack them on the head, because it's amazing to me how much we're doing, and I think if people don't know that, that's disappointing.
Yeah.
you guys have been remarkably
So-
efficient. It's gotten a lot done in a short period of time.
So that nobody can say
That's how
that
all
we're
government
not
works.
working.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Really transparent.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah,
'cause I see
thorough
that as a
and-
critique generally of government work.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Thank you. So we'll have copies of the charter, our charge,
And the CPAR resolution.
the CPAR resolution. All right, CPAR slides look good.
Should
Miscellaneous.
we read each charge? I know you noted on there, like, for each of the topics we've gone over, the overview of charge. Is that going to include reading the actual charge itself?
Maybe if you, they sort of flow together, the individual charges. Maybe I just read the full
Okay.
Charter Review Committee charge at the beginning.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because these are from the charge
Right.
for each of these topics, but yeah, I think that's fair. Want me to do this one? Or do you want to?
You can do it.
Rebecca, wonderful. Thank you.
And this, yeah, just to your point, I'm also made a point to put in here about we have a commitment to respond to every single public comment.
Yeah.
Which I'm going to
Yeah.
say in
Yeah.
this, just so people recognize that,
Mhm.
part of that too.
Any notes on the miscellaneous slide?
Very colorful.
Thank you. I know how much you like the different colors.
Font is all the same color, other than the white.
Except they're not. Some of them are white.
It does appear that there is a miscellaneous space in the third bullet point, falls outside of
Ooh,
charges.
that's a double space, yep. And issue related.
Where?
Wow.
What? Falls outside of charges.
There's a space at the
Oh, it
a leading
doesn't line
space
up.
there.
Potential and charter as well.
It's a miscellaneous
Yeah,
space.
that's true. Yeah.
If you
Where is
will.
it?
Wow.
Could probably fit in.
Oh, before the word
Yeah.
falls.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I have to go back through
It's totally
all
fine,
these. I did these on a train, just so people know. I was on a train to Toronto when I made these
This is a
slides.
draft.
You could fit an at symbol in between already and included on there, for sure. Oh, charter humor.
Actually, this one's actually maybe more substantial. Ordinance is misspelled at the bottom.
I see that too.
Okay.
I already have that.
Depends how you pronounce it.
That's right. That's the Vermont pronunciation, right?
Where I come from, that's spot on right there.
That's what I
That'd be
said.
funny.
Yeah.
All the Flatlanders here.
Assuming we survive.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad we can still laugh at 5 o'clock.
What else are you gonna do?
All right. Miscellaneous looks good to everyone.
Yeah.
Any notes on the questions and comments slide? Great.
I love graphics. man.
Great job on that.
Yeah, really, thank you.
Good job.
Super good.
That's awesome.
If we could get the town of Bennington instead of the town of Brattleboro on the cover, that'd be great.
Brattleboro, taken by Michael.
Next will be New Waterski. Okay.
All right.
Jeremy?
We are very nearly at the end here. Upcoming agenda. I think there's probably 2 good candidates for our focus group next week. I think it's probably between properties and governance. Do folks have a sense if one of those is more ready than the other for discussion?
Go ahead.
I'd say either one. I think we'll be ready to go for discussion.
Okay.
Yeah. You feel the same way, Drew?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
said governance is pretty close.
Yeah.
Okay.
Properties would be there.
Okay. Properties, you said?
I'd like to step up and go with that, yeah.
Okay, we'll go with properties. That sounds great
Yeah.
to me.
Okay.
It's hurtful.
That's hurtful.
Well, as somebody who's on the properties committee, like, there's a lot of substance we haven't heard from governance, right? What more do we have to add beyond what we've already
Yeah.
kind of outlined in terms of discussion related, right?
Right. Yeah. I think we've presented everything before to the whole committee. We've talked about it. Like I say, the meeting that we're going to have on Wednesday is a lot more just clarifying of and things like that. So
Right.
I think we'll honestly be ready to present and
I'd say-
ready to go to committee.
You have a meeting Wednesday for
Yeah.
properties.
Mhm.
Does governance have any meetings next week?
We have a standing meeting
Yeah.
on Wednesday.
Okay. Okay, but no additional stakeholders that you're meeting with next week?
No.
Okay. Let's go with governance then,
Yeah.
Okay.
actually. Yeah.
I take back my
Sorry,
comment.
But no, I feel blighted.
Yeah. It's a tough crowd.
I mean, we are definitely getting close to our
Yeah.
recommendation
Yeah.
part, but I feel like that particular topic hasn't been discussed at length
No,
with
good
the
point.
group, right?
Yeah, no, that'll be good.
That's fine.
Thank you for that direction.
I was hoping it was going to be miscellaneous committee that was going to go next week, but we need some public comments. To the public.
Yes.
We need
Yes.
public comments.
And a budget.
I don't. We'll have next week. Will be the last meeting before the public forum.
Right.
Right. So we'll probably have some last minute notes on that on next week's agenda as well.
Yeah.
So we should probably plan on another post 5 o'clock meeting.
I guess that depends on governance, really. Seaport went on for 40 minutes today.
Yeah.
All right, great. Any other topics for the next agenda?
Do we want to add that we're going to finalize these? Because I'll be putting all the changes and anything else that can come in this week.
Yeah, I have that down as finalized PowerPoint.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's make sure.
Okay.
Great. Any other business? No.
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 Great. I'm good. Do I hear a
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Wonderful. Thank you, everyone,
Yeah,
for sticking
seriously.
it out